Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, Raelan Agle. So, a little bit about Raelan before we jump in. Raelan lived with chronic fatigue syndrome for 10 years before finally fully recovering. After countless doctor's visits and tens of thousands of dollars spent, without providing much relief from her illness, she eventually realized that she would have to look within herself and listen to her body to find her path back to health. And thankfully, she did fully recover. Since her recovery, Raelan has become passionate about supporting others on their wellness journey. She is the author of Finding Freedom, Escaping from the Prison of Chronic Fatigue Syndrome, and has a popular YouTube channel sharing recovery stories of others, along with her resources for health and healing, and online courses to support people in their healing and happiness journey. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Tanner, thank you so much for having me. It is great to be here.
Yeah. And we talked, what was it, maybe a couple months ago? And I was on your YouTube channel. So we're going back and forth.
Yes, the tables have turned. Now I'm in the hot seat.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being here. Now I know your YouTube channel is getting bigger and bigger by the day. I check in on it now and then, which is amazing to see. And one thing we were talking earlier that's really unique about your YouTube channel is just like how many success stories that you have, like recovery stories that you have on your channel. Do you know, like, have you counted like how many you've done over the years?
I don't know the exact number, but right now we're getting up close to about 200. So yeah, it's a lot.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. And can you share a bit about how, your recovery stories have changed or evolved over time that are on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to go through this. And one of the unique things I think that we see with the recovery interviews on my channel is that I've never filtered for any specific type of story, or it's not that I only want to share stories supporting one program or one approach. Like just however you recovered, I want to hear about it and I want to help share it. So it's just like trying to get as wide of a variety as possible so we can put out a buffet of information for people. And it's not even been 5 years. So you would think that there wouldn't be that many changes in the interviews over time, but it's been really dramatic and interesting to see. So when I first started recovering people, it seemed like the recovery themes were all over the place. There seemed to be no connection. And it was, I recovered with a specific diet, or some shaman in the jungle in Thailand gave me frog poisoning, or it seems so random. And I thought, wow, I don't know if this is adding more confusion to the pot or what it is. But then really it didn't take too long. Started seeing some themes, but we didn't really understand it. Lots of people were coming on saying things like, I changed my career, or I realized I wasn't living a life in line with how I wanted to be living, or that I was driving myself really hard and I was really critical of myself. And I realized I had to spend more time in nature, and these things that people were crediting with their recovery. And then I started worrying, thinking, oh no, like a bunch of very unwell people are watching these videos and they're looking for some serious answers. And of course I believed everyone I was interviewing, but I thought no one's tuning in to hear, oh, I'll just spend more time with some squirrels and you'll start feeling better. Some of these things that people were saying.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of stuff around stress levels and emotion and the way they were living their lives and how hard they were driving themselves. And then from there, I started seeing another evolution in what people were saying. And people were still sort of saying the same thing, but now everyone seemed to understand what was going on. So people were coming on saying like, oh, I realized there was some autonomic nervous system dysregulation and my threat assessment systems were on high alert. And, so it was still the spending more time in nature, working on emotions, working on stress, working on self-criticism, working on fear and all of that stuff. But now virtually everyone who comes on is, so well informed on the topic. So it's like we went from really just sort of feeling our way around in the dark to, okay, we're figuring out these things that are working, but we don't know why, to now information is rapidly spreading and people are saying a lot of the same things, interview after interview after interview. So it's been really interesting to see.
Yeah, and it's an interesting theme, like, because it's been less than 5 years, as you said, of people coming out with these kind of random ways that worked for them. And now everyone kind of has this language that they're all following. Hey,
it is. And it's even when they seemed really random. Now that I zoom out and look at it, I can see the connections there as well. I mean, even myself, I credited something that could be compared to like a gradiated exercise program, which I knew is almost a taboo thing to talk about, but it was very gentle and it was just about movement. But when I look back now and I see it, it was more like gradual re-exposure therapy. It was like slowly bringing in movement and not being scared of it and not freaking out if some symptoms came on. So at the time I thought it was about exercise and something more physical and reconditioning my body. So even a lot of these random things, my point being, when you look back, it was like people taking control of some things in their life, not being scared of living anymore, and, finding ways to kind of gently reintegrate themselves back into their lives. So yeah, it's not so much that I think that the recovery themes have changed over the years. It's just our understanding of it is rapidly progressing.
Rapidly, yeah. And there's just so much information out there now for people to understand, these are the main areas you need to focus on potentially to heal. And again, I appreciate what you said, because everyone is different. Like there's these themes, but everyone's different of what uniquely works for them. And before this, I was listening to a few success stories on your channel, and there's themes, but what someone related to, what was beneficial for them, it could be different from a lot of other people. And I think that's an amazing benefit you have on your channel of having so many success stories, because people can look through and find potentially what apply for them.
Yeah. And sometimes I think we need to hear things explained in different ways. The way one person talks about it won't resonate, but then someone else will share their perspective or their journey, and then it just clicks. So I think it's important to hear a variety of perspectives and things told in different ways.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I'm sure you've thought about this a lot over the years, but how do you see, the benefit of these success stories, these healing stories in someone's recovery process? Like, I'm sure you've gotten lots of feedback from people, but I'm curious, like, where do you kind of see the benefit of it kind of sitting?
There's over the years, I've come to appreciate just from what people have given me in feedback from what's helpful for them in watching these interviews. I mean, one of the big things is hope, because it can be very challenging going through these journeys. And there's still a ton of information out there telling people that they're never going to get better, from these various conditions. So it's just, we need to keep finding that way to keep picking ourselves back up and keep going and keep searching for our puzzle pieces and find that resilience. So one of the biggest things I hear from people is that it's just, especially in those really trying times, it's hope. And people bookmark their favorite ones, and on a really rough day, they'll put it on, and these people get them through. So, I mean, that's massive. And it's also just really comforting and validating and normalizing to see that you're not alone in what you're going through. I know that with my journey, I felt like what I was going through was I was the only person in the world facing this, even though I'm sure I knew that wasn't true, but it can feel very isolating and like nobody gets it. So to hear people talk and be like, oh my goodness, it's like you're telling my story, like you get it. Because I think a lot of us just want someone to get it, and we try and explain things to the people in our lives around us, but unless they've been through it, they're not going to get it as much as they want to. They're really not going to. So there's just something really powerful in seeing people that are like, oh yes, okay, I'm not alone, and somebody gets it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's that element of community I find is so vital in the sense of, and I remember being in having widespread chronic pain and thinking the same thing. Like no one gets it. And I knew there was people out there with chronic pain, but you're not connected to them when you're in that kind of place. And so it's amazing because it can be so normalizing, so validating for someone to hear, hey, I went through this. And then there's that hope element of I actually got better utilizing some of these strategies and mind body techniques to actually heal. So it's both ends I think is so beneficial for people.
And it's even coming along even further than that, which is amazing to see, because initially, I thought if I just put some hope in the world, that is like mission accomplished. This will all be worthwhile. But now a lot of people are also finding the recovery strategies that they need from these interviews, taking pieces here and there. And for the people who are facing a mind-body condition, brain-body condition, where things like neuroplasticity and all of that is a part of their healing, which is a massive chunk of those people, I've heard the term book recoveries or video recoveries. People start to get better just by reading a book and understanding what's going on, or just by watching some videos and getting a better perspective. So the education piece is there, and it's also just good for your nervous system. Just like, okay, I'm okay. I don't need to panic. Everything's going to be okay. So yeah, the recovery interviews I think are really powerful in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of leads me to my next question I wanted to talk about is, and whether it's from your own personal experience or whether it's from all the success and recovery stories that you've done, what I'm interested in knowing is, what strategies, I'm asking you like a very pinpointed question here, but it's probably pretty broad, what strategies or techniques you've found to be the most effective. Of course, the education is very key. We see that with a portion of people that just get the education and understand why their symptoms are actually taking place and that it's possible to retrain their brain out of them. But I'm interested in knowing, what strategies have you found to be the most effective for people over the years?
So definitely themes with recovery, but also a lot of unique things. The biggest one by far, in interview after interview after interview, that people are finding the most effective is when they dial into and they understand that component of how chronic symptoms are generated in the body, and the role of the brain, the role of our threat assessment systems, of neuroplasticity, and all of that. So that one is undeniable. I hear over and over and over again. But even for that theme, though, what that looks like for each person can be a little bit different. Some people, they're doing very specific brain retraining programs that work for them. Other people, it's about, focusing less on recovery and more in, having more joy in their life, whatever it is. Like I used to spend time in nature. Now I spend more time outdoors. I'm switching careers, getting out of a stressful relationship, learning to be kinder to myself, meditating more. It's just a wide variety of things that fall under that general approach to recovery. For some people, it's very specific things like diet changes and all of that, but it's actually very rare. It's almost never that people are telling me things like, it was this combination of supplements that helped me to get better, or it was this one very specific rigid diet that was the key to everything, or it was this one medication. Every once in a while it is, but for the most part, that typical path that a lot of us go down, which is trying a bunch of supplements, trying out all these different diets, trying to stick to that are really challenging, waiting for a medication from our doctor, none of those seem to be, for the most part, the answer for most people. Yeah, it really is a process of internal transformation on some level that works with everything else in their body that seems to get them on their path to getting past this.
Yeah. And I like what you said there. I think that's what most of us think when we have chronic symptoms, whatever the symptoms are, is or like, how do we medically treat this in some way? And it's like that standard medical care, which, things like diet or supplements or medications or treatments that we use. And it's not to say that they don't work, but they work for such a small number of people compared to often how people are healing their chronic symptoms that have had them for many, many years. And you're right, there's this internal shifting. And one thing that I almost hear as you're talking is it's almost like people uniquely find how to basically cultivate more safety in their life to some capacity. And that's going to look different every single person.
Yeah.
I think some people really want like a very prescribed approach, but to turn off your threat system in your brain and your nervous system, like that's not a one size fits all. Like it's so different with every single person, which is clear in your success stories, right? Like everyone finds these unique ways that really work well for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And so, when we talk about CFS, MECFS, over the years, I'm sure you've thought about this lots. We use the term neuroplastic. I know there's a lot of terms out there for mind-body symptoms. But when people are coming to this approach, like how often in your success stories are they really finding that, hey, these are neuroplastic in nature? This is like a brain and nervous system issue going on, more so than maybe this is like structural, this is something physically wrong with me. Like, have you seen over the years, like what the rates are? I'm asking a very hard question here, but just out of curiosity with all the people you've interviewed.
Yeah, I think this is the $1 million, the $1 billion question. And of course, we have millions and millions of people in the world now with MECFS, and now a lot of them with long COVID. Versions of long COVID that are looking very similar, if not exactly the same as MECFS for some people. So with the small amount of research we have on all of these people in the world, it's I don't think anyone on the planet can say definitively, what percentage of people this applies to.
Yeah.
That being said, when we look at the research out there for treating chronic long-term symptoms, and we know that pain science is leading the way in this, because many of us with MECFS, many of the people I recover are recovering using approaches that were meant specifically just for chronic pain. And when we look at all of that research and that science, it is pointing to a overwhelming majority of people benefiting from some sort of approach that is addressing neuroplasticity, neuroplastic symptoms, and so forth. And then when I look at the people that I've interviewed, it is also the overwhelming majority of people who recovered using that approach versus on trying to address specific structural damages in the body. So from where I sit, it seems like the number one thing to go to with these sorts of conditions. I always say that with a caveat that, I have, I guess, it would be fair to say a bias towards this, because so many of my interviewed people are recovering with this strategy, and I don't see what I don't see. So it's likely that people who are going to find these approaches effective are going to gravitate towards the content on my channel and then reach out and share their stories. So there's a bit of, it's a snapshot of what's going on in the world, but it's not the entire picture. So I guess to sum that up, from where I'm sitting, I think it is a large percentage of people, but I can't know for sure. And I don't think anyone at this point can know for sure exactly where that
we just can't draw the line.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. You're kind of hitting on the point that I was hoping to get to is, there's so much research coming out, and it's still a small portion on chronic pain, especially like chronic back pain, chronic neck pain. Like these are really common things. These are what the treatments are often being trialed on. But we know like these treatments, like pain reprocessing therapy or Dr. Schuberter's like emotional awareness and expression therapy, we know lots of people use them for chronic fatigue syndrome, and newly more long COVID, especially as well. and like they are effective in lots of ways for people, which is amazing. But I hope in the near future people do some bigger studies using some of these approaches on this, right?
Yeah, it's another barrier because I never would have thought to read a book called Healing Back Pain to get over chronic fatigue syndrome. Whereas that book is, by Dr. John Sarno, is the #1 cited book in my recovery interviews for the book that helped people the most. So not only is thinking about this approach to recovery for chronic pain, I would imagine you've encountered, is a new way of thinking for a lot of people, despite the science being there and the books being there and the experts all talking about it. But now with ME/CFS and long COVID, you have to open your mind even more. You have to start thinking about this new way of thinking about chronic symptoms, and then also shift your okay, and they're talking about back pain, but somehow this does apply to my long COVID. It's just so many barriers to finding the information that you need and being able to believe it and accept it, which is understandable. Because I just don't get how this applies to me, but for many people it does.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the popularity of your channel, because I think it does provide that information to people, because the research hasn't caught up yet, right? Like this is the one of the main issues, unfortunately. But there's so many stories of people healing CFS, long COVID, using these approaches. Now, I know you have a few courses on your website. I was looking on there the other day. One of the main ones on like brain retraining. I thought really quickly, maybe you could give an understanding of like what brain retraining practices are, and maybe how they can be helpful for someone with these symptoms.
Yes. So, I mean, this all comes down to understanding the nature of chronic symptoms, and for the most part, how they are generated. Because I know I don't have to tell you, and probably a lot of your viewers and listeners are getting quite savvy on this topic. But it's, we used to think of symptoms in our body as just coming out of nowhere, or, we touch something hot and we just get burnt, and that's just a byproduct of it, feeling some pain. But now we understand that symptoms all have a purpose, that they are there to help us to stay alive and to thrive. We're not just suffering for no reason. So if you're feeling something in your body, some sort of threat assessment has happened from your brain, from your nervous system, and they have generated a symptom, created a symptom to get your attention. And we understand now with chronic symptoms that there are sometimes many reasons that these symptoms are persisting and they're not helpful. Whether these mistakes have been generated in error, because mistakes in communication do happen in the body, whether our threat assessment systems are hypersensitive because we live in a world that is very different than what our body was built to live in. It wasn't built to assess the threat from Reddit and the news and traffic and having 6 digital devices in front of us at all times and knowing about every war. So there's just a lot of different things going on where our bodies can be generating symptoms that aren't helpful for us. And working with our brain and our nervous system can help to turn those symptoms off. And, in the different people I've talked to and the different program creators I've interviewed and books I've read, the whole process boils down to essentially 3 main components or 3 main steps. And that first one is the education piece. It's understanding what's happening, So learning about all of the things that I just talked about. And that's how come sometimes we have cases of these book recoveries and video recoveries, because for many people, just shining a light on it, understanding what's going on, is enough, or it is a massive first step towards getting better.
Yeah.
And then once you have that information, you understand that threat assessment comes down to fear. So the second phase of this is working with that fear. And where is that fear coming from? And a lot of times it's just spiraling fear around the symptoms that you're having. Oh my goodness, what's going on? My body is broken. I have all of this pain or extreme chronic fatigue, nausea, all the thousands of symptoms that we get. And we start to feel like we're in a really bad place, which makes us even more scared, which solidifies those pathways in the brain saying, yes, something is
Yeah.
horribly wrong. So, once we understand what's going on, we're working on the fear to start having that trust that our body is okay, and bringing in feelings of safety wherever that comes from. And that looks different, for everybody. And different brain training programs and books have different approaches and strategies and
Yeah.
ideas for how you can achieve that feeling of safety. And then once you get to that place of understanding what's going on with your symptoms, incorporating those feelings of safety and trusting that your body is okay, then it's about slowly, gradually, safely just bringing back in normal activity into your life. And I've interviewed people that have talked about it like phobia treatment, like I said, gradual re-exposure therapy. It's because we get wired to think, I think about one woman I interviewed who she said, I could walk around my house and I was okay. I could walk to the kitchen, to the bathroom, to the bedroom, do what I needed to do. But the minute I walked at my front door and just walked to the end of the sidewalk in my front yard and then came back, a million symptoms would come up. I would get sick. And she's
Yeah.
like, it started to click. Like, why can I walk on this side of the door, but I can't walk on that side of the door? So we become afraid of a lot of things. If I go outside, I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to be sick. If I sit up too long, if I move, if I exercise, blah, 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 blah. So that last piece
Yeah.
is about working with your fear and slowly starting to reintegrate these normal things into your life and being at peace with the symptoms, knowing that some symptoms will pop up and that's okay. And not judging your progress by how many symptoms you're having, but your reaction to them. It's okay.
Yeah.
I feel a little bit worse. I knew this was going to happen. It's just my brain, my body trying to help me. We're doing some rewiring. Everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. That's a great. I really appreciate that description for people, because lots of people are doing brain retraining. And you're right. There's so many different brain retraining programs out there. Everyone's doing different things, and they're all great, to be honest. The ones I've come across, it's just they're framed in slightly different ways, and so they work better for certain people. But I really do appreciate the overview about it, for anyone new coming to brain retraining and why are we even doing this? Like there's science to back why we're doing this. It's shown to be effective. So I really do appreciate you sharing that, and I appreciate you coming on the channel today. I wanted to give you a little time at the end. I know you have some professional offerings, I believe, on your website and YouTube channel. Is there any of them that you want to discuss before we end off today?
Well, virtually everything that I put out is available on the internet in some format for free. So you can, if you can dig and search, I have an email list. Every week I put out emails and people can get just the highlights from the YouTube interviews that I do if it's too much to watch all these videos. So it's all out there. But for people who don't want to dig or want a bit more of a structured approach, I have some online courses that I put together. And I did do one around brain retraining. And you're going to be hearing a lot of the same stuff that you probably hear in most of the other programs, because it is all based in science. So most of us are saying the same things. So it's about, finding a program and a person that resonates for you and feels like it's going to be a good fit for you and has the level of support that you need. So I do have a program called Brain Retraining 101 for ME/CFS and long COVID recovery. And it's a self-study program that is just a bunch of short, easily digestible videos, taking, all of that information that's on my channel in hundreds of videos and just really condensing it. And then we have I have group calls for people in the course. So you can get on a call with me and we can just check in, support one another, answer questions, and be there for people on their journey. So those are probably the biggest things that I have available for people.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. I'll put all the links of how people can see your work in the description of the episode, so people can look for it there. And again, I really appreciate you spending the time. So thank you everyone for listening, and I will talk to you all next week.